December 19th meeting of the Milton Planning Commission to order. I have to go over a bunch of rules, so bear with me for a minute. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm George Ragsdale. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezonings, use permits, concurrent variance applications, the comprehensive land use plan and plan map, and amendments to the zoning ordinance. The members of the Planning Commission, to my left, Commissioner Fred Edwards, Commissioner Paul Moore, Commissioner Gary Burchett, Commissioner Chris Doty, Commissioner Mark Bittner, and Commissioner Joe Kramer. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I want to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for conducting the meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a cumulative total of 10 minutes to present their petition. The applicant may choose to save some of this time for rebuttal following any presentation by the opposition. Opposition will also be allowed a cumulative total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is on the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains within their allotted 10-minute time. The community development staff will keep track of the time, which will be up here on the clocks on the wall, and will inform us periodically of the remaining time for presentations. Each person that wants to speak needs to fill out a speaker card, the yellow cards, and turn them in to Robin before you come up to speak. When you come up to speak, please identify yourself by name and your address, and if you're speaking on behalf of any organization, please make that known before you speak. When an opponent of a rezoning action is made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, any campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the City of Milton Council, it's the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the city at least 5 days prior to tonight's meeting. So if you haven't done that, if you've made a contribution of $250 or more to any of our council members and have not filed a disclosure prior to tonight's meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you do so, because not doing so would be a misdemeanor. Each application has been properly filed with the Community Development Department. Signs have been posted, banners have been advertised, and notices have been mailed to property owners affected by this zoning as required by our ordinance. Our recommendations tonight will be forwarded to the City Council for final disposition. The Mayor and City Council hearing will be approximately 3.5 weeks from tonight, on the third Monday of the month here in Council Chambers. The application has been reviewed by our community development staff in conjunction with various agencies and departments. Their recommendations, findings, and conclusions are before us tonight in both in written form, and those have been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Please, if you would, turn off any cell phones, or at least silence them, so that we don't have those distractions. Any remarks that you have should be addressed to the Planning Commission. In addition, if you have anything that you want to submit to the Planning Commission for consideration, please do that through our community development staff. Finally, to the applicant, if your petition is deferred, you are required to update or obtain a new sign and repost it, and there are no exceptions. With those rules in mind, the first part of the meeting is our public comment. Anybody here that would like to speak on anything that is not on the agenda, there are basically, well, the agenda is posted, everybody can see that. If there's anybody who would like to speak on anything other than what's on the agenda, this is the time to do that. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we need a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. First item on the agenda is the minutes of the November 27th Planning Commission meeting. Are there any changes or corrections in the minutes from that meeting? Hearing none, we need a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
I think it's a motion, I'm sorry for
Fred?
the,
I made,
approved,
on the
Fred
first one,
moved, and Paul approved.
I made the motion, Joe.
Paul seconded, sorry.
On the original comment,
I
public
second.
comment, it was me and Joe.
Sorry. For the minutes, it was Fred moving
Fred
and
and-
Paul seconding.
can I make a suggestion before we start into the agenda? I know there's a lot of people here for RZ 1216, but there's also a small group of people for 1217, which they're gonna be asking for deferral. I was gonna ask if it would be up to you guys to maybe swap them so people don't have to wait.
Sure.
Swap 2 and 3 with each other.
Yeah, I think we can do that. So which one do you want to take first?
I think it'd be best to do the RZ 1217, the Cockburn Road and Bethany Bend.
Okay. We need a motion to amend the agenda, though.
Yes.
So moved.
Second?
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Kramer, second by Commissioner Moore. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you. I think the applicant will thank you. So the first item is RZ 1217, U 12-02, VZ 12-08, northeast corner of Bethany Bend and Cogburn Road by Arrowhead Real Estate Partners to rezone from AG1 agricultural to TR townhouse residential, and request a use permit to develop a 95-unit assisted living facility and 19 single-family detached residences on approximately 9.09 acres. A 4-court concurrent variance to increase the height to 40 feet from average grade to bottom feet and 2 stories to 3 stories. To reduce the front property setback from 40 feet to 20 feet along Bethany Bend, adjacent to single-family lots. 3, to reduce the minimum side yard setback for single-family lots from 7 feet to 5 feet. And lastly, to reduce the minimum rear setback for the single-family lots from 25 to 20 feet. And staff has recommended, in concurrence with the applicant's request, to request a deferral to the January 22nd, 2013 Planning Commission meeting.
Okay.
And the applicant is here to answer any questions that you may have, or he can further explain.
Okay. What we're going to do is follow the time. The applicant will have 10 minutes. The opposition will have 10 minutes to the extent they want to use that. We're not going to ask any questions tonight. We'll defer our questions to the January meeting. But since everybody's here, we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to make their comments. So,
Curtis Hicks, 8647 Ellard Drive, Alpharetta, Georgia. I am the applicant. We are respectfully requesting a deferral of the application. We've had a community information hearing and a community participation hearing. There's several questions as it relates to the application, specifically as it relates to the actual operation of the assisted living. In addition, we're going to be, during the deferral time, we're going to be amending the application to change the categories, which will hopefully remove some of the variances. We'll be amending the site plan. And the main reason for the deferral is to be able to come back to the community, be able to provide more information for questions and concerns they had. We're going to go ahead and amend the site plan to take in some of the suggestions and recommendations from the community, and then to have a revised site plan when we come back before the Planning Commission. We will I've engaged Pete Hendricks to help me along with staff to refine and amend the application so that we can come back and to make sure that we are comfortably inside of and to minimize any variances and special use permits that we may need. I'll save the rest for
is the January 22nd deferral date acceptable, given everything you said you were going to try and do?
It is. I believe that we have what we need. I've been working with Robin and the other members of the staff, and we will be. I think we can make that time frame.
Okay.
We do have two people in the audience who'd like to speak. The first one is Roger Kubler.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to cut into anyone else's time. What increment of this 10 do I have?
As much as you want.
There's one other person.
Okay. My name's Roger Kubler. I'm a resident of Milton. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and thank you for your service. Aside from the density issue, that is so obscene, I won't even try to tackle it tonight. I'm surprised the applicant didn't add a topless bar to his plan. I'd like to speak to you in terms of traffic issues. I have a great concern for the health and safety of children in the area. My children are up and grown, but I have overseen the operations of 2 major school districts. I'd like to remind you that Cambridge High School has a capacity for approximately 900 more students. Kings Ridge is building a 22-classroom high school, and based on my professional experience, I can assure you that teenagers will not, if they have any other option, ride a school bus. We already have obscene traffic jams. We have 2 fine members of the Milton Police Force who have to show up every day to guide traffic. The school, community is simply not funded for the kind of infrastructure improvements that would be necessary to ensure safe surroundings. I witnessed a near fatal child pedestrian accident at the old bridge on Cogburn. It took 2 years to get that bridge in place. I'm told there's some doubt about when, if ever, we will have sidewalks in that area, and yet we're cramming an assisted living facility and a very, very dense housing development on a meager 9 acres of land. Specifically in terms of traffic, I'd like to point out that that assisted living facility is going to have visitor traffic and it's going to have vendor support traffic. And the plan lays out an entrance exit on Cogburn less than a couple hundred yards from a lighted intersection. Those commercial vehicles are going to want to turn left on Cogburn. I've already witnessed multiple accidents on Cogburn because of high speed and poor traffic control. The city simply doesn't have the funds to provide the infrastructure that would be necessary to ensure a safe surrounding for children. You have 2 schools on one of 2 corners. You have a church on the 3rd corner. We have more than enough density. The Milton City logo features a horse, an equestrian symbol. I assume that has to do with a commitment to open spaces. I'm not quite sure really why the city of Milton was formed, but I can tell you that this proposed development definitely flies in the face of open space, equestrian community. Design looks to me more like an urban ghetto in the making. I thank you for your time, and I hope you will consider the issue of safety for children, not to mention the traffic clogging that is already going on as we speak. In conclusion, I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that the middle school, not too far down the road, is already using portable classrooms. So we have more than 1,000 high school students planned, plus we've got a bow wave coming from the middle school. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kubler, you may have said at the beginning and I didn't write it down. What was your address?
560 Devonshire Farms Way.
Okay, thank you.
The next person is Patricia Friedland.
Robin.
Apologize, I'm not a public speaker, so bear with me. I am Patricia Fredlin. I live at 320 Stonehill Point. I am directly behind the proposed development. Sorry, I have to read. I'm, again, not a public speaker. I and my neighbors in the Oakstone Glen subdivision are vehemently opposed to the rezoning request and development being proposed for the 9-acre property and directly adjacent to our properties. Suffice it to say that non-transitional, immensely high-density housing and part commercial 3-story assisted living facility is a total inappropriate use of the property alongside our 1-acre homes. Rezoning, density, traffic, intersection, inappropriate use, non-transitional, requested variances, and many other issues aside, this simply does not fit in with the plans for Milton. The simple fact and the reality is that this proposal goes completely against the comprehensive land use plan and non-sewer requirements that we were recommended, accepted, and implemented for this property. And this after nearly 2 years of extensive volunteer hours, effort, and commitment, again, will directly impact not just my home, the other 4 homes that are adjacent, but our entire subdivision. During the developer spoke about during the community meeting that, you know, we were in communications about questions, you know, that we all had. We left that meeting having more questions than we did answers. There were some confusing statements that were made. In fact, in prior meetings like this, a statement was made that we, the neighborhood, were opposed to other developers that had come in prior, which is a false statement. We worked with other developers, both David Chatham and the Mormon Church, that had come in. We were, you know, 5 of us, 5 homeowners, specifically went and met with the developer, with the Mormon Church, and was working with and had, you know, was actually happy with the things that they had met. It was, in fact, we were told your requirements that they could not meet and why they pulled out. Also, it was said in this past meeting, the community meeting, that it was suggested, I don't want to put words, but it was suggested that when the landowner went to the city of Milton, that this plan was what was recommended to them by the city of Milton. I'm curious to know if that is in fact a true statement, or was that another misleading statement that was made that evening to us. I don't believe that's your position as elected officials to make recommendations for properties to individuals. I believe you represent us all as a city, not one individual developer. That, again, we're not just interested in the changes of the building, you know, the height. You know, yes, that is a strong, because I will be looked down upon all 95 residents of that facility.
2 minutes left.
And as much as I do care, you know, for the older generation, I don't think they care to be looking upon my neighbor, my backyard. I just don't feel commercial property, commercial building, transitioning from what's already existing in Cambridge to that property, to our homes, is really what the city of Milton had intended for the use of that property. Thank you.
Thank you.
I actually do have one more speaker that came up, Mr. E.B. Peebles.
Spell it, Robert. Could you spell it?
Peebles.
Thank you.
Good evening. I live at 725 Bethany Green Court, about a pitching wedge away from what they want to do. You live in Alpharetta, I know that. I wasn't at the community meeting, so I don't know who would manage this. But I know you don't live in Milton, so it's no impact on you. Pete, I don't know where you live. We've butted heads before. For those of us that do live in Milton, as I do, this goes against every reason we moved up here. AG1 is why we moved up here. It's what Milton is. So, you know, I don't see a substantial tax revenue or anything to be gained by the city. I think it opens the door to anyone else who wants to change the zoning to be able to do so. I'd say there's no advantage to this. There's another retirement community being built towards the library. I forget what road it's on, but it's, you know, I don't know how many units it is. Vaughn, thank you. So there's really, how much need is there for this type of home? But are we going to consider the corporate needs or the revenue of the company that wants to build this or manage this? Are we going to consider what the citizens of Milton want? And if you can find a citizen of Milton that would support this, I'd like to meet them. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
That's all the speakers we have.
Anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? Mr. Hicks, do you want your remaining time?
I just want to say that, again, we're requesting the deferral so that we can better answer the questions, provide better understanding to the operation of the assisted living, how it would relate to the surrounding property, and to see if we can reach an agreement with the homeowners, or at least to be able to help alleviate their problems, and that's the reason for the deferral. Thank you.
Anyone else that wants to speak in favor of or against the application at this point? We need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Commissioner Burchett moved and Kramer seconded. All those in favor? Do we need any discussion tonight?
Yes.
Okay. The motion is to, we need a motion on the floor to support the deferral to the January 22nd.
We had,
Planning Commission.
we haven't voted on closing the public comment first.
Good point, sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We need a motion to defer.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the request to defer RZ 12-17 / U 12-02 VC 12-08 to the January 22nd Planning Commission meeting, per the request of the applicant.
I'll second that motion.
Moved by Commissioner Moore, seconded by Commissioner Edwards. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay. Robin, do we want to take the other deferral first or not?
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that. So the next, we'll go back to number 1, U 12-01, VC 12-07. The following item has been administratively deferred to the January 22nd, 2013 Planning Commission meeting. So I guess you don't need to take an action on that. So.
No. Just
Okay,
want
so
to make sure
now
it's
we'll
on the
go
agenda.
to RZ 1216, BC 12-06, 12855 Hopewell Road, by Beezer Homes to rezone AG1 to NUP Neighborhood Unit Plan to develop 29 single-family homes at a density of 4.18 units per acre. A two-part concurrent variance, 1, reduce the periphery setback from 40 feet to 25 feet along the east and north property lines and 7 feet along the south property line. Number 2, to allow sidewalks along only one side of the street on the interior of the development.
Robin, could I stop you there for a minute?
Sure.
Just in case, is there anybody out there that was here tonight to speak on U 1201, the one that was administratively deferred? I just want to make sure that nobody's sitting here waiting, because that, we've just administratively deferred that to the next meeting, so, okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. This first slide shows you the location of the site. It's a little under 7 acres, and it's reflected in the middle of the slide. In terms of background on the site contains 6.931 acres. It's located just north of the city of Alpharetta. It's currently zoned AG1, agricultural with 1 single-family residence on it. The applicant seeks a rezoning to NUP, which is a neighborhood unit plan, to develop 29 single-family residences. Also, the applicant seeks a 2-part concurrent variance to reduce periphery setbacks for the development and seeks permission not to build sidewalks on both sides of the internal streets. This slide shows the existing zoning of the site and the surrounding zoning of the parcels in the area. The next slide shows a portion of the Georgia 400 Highway 9 LCI planning study. And you will see the site pointed out on the plan in front of you. This LCI study showed this area to be a transition area, which was defined as low scale, primarily residential, likely senior attached and small lot single family with limited neighborhood serving retail office. Pardon me. To maintain lower scale development with appropriate buffers to residential neighborhoods, to encourage linear paths along roadways, to limit setbacks from Highway 9 where practical, and to require parking lot and right-of-way landscaping. So this is the plan, and this plan did amend our comprehensive plan. So this is the official land use policy now for the city for this area. The next slide shows existing uses of the area, and the following page does delineate by number those uses as reflected on the map on the previous slide. And you'll see that the area to the west is essentially 1 acre housing development. The area to the north and to the east is approximately 2.5, 3 units to the acre. The area to the south, of course, has the, immediately to the south is the senior living facility of 133 units. And then just immediately to the south of that is the Orchard subdivision, which is a 5.51 unit to the acre. Moving on, you'll see the site plan that was submitted November the 6th, 2012, which you also have a copy in your packet. We did a site plan analysis of the development standards for a neighborhood unit plan in terms of looking at what those standards are and how it matched up with the proposed development. And the development essentially met all the standards of an NUP neighborhood unit plan, with the exception of the bottom there. You'll see in terms of the required minimum perimeter setback for the entire development shall be 40 feet. The proposed development is asking for a variance so as to have 25 feet along the east and north property line and 7 feet along the south end property line. And the applicant has asked for a concurrent variance for these properties. The following are proposed building setbacks for individual lots. The NUP allows the applicant to specify what these building setbacks are. So the applicant has asked for the following: that the front yard setback be 10 feet, the side yard setback be anywhere from 0 to 7 feet, but with a 14-foot minimum between the structures. That the side yard setback adjacent to the street be 7 feet, and the rear yard setback be 15 feet. Staff recommends that the lots number 20 through 29 on the site plan be alley access lots. This type of design will further create a walkable village-type community that will provide an alternative subdivision design for the area where there are typical suburban single-family designs. This requirement will be included in the recommended conditions. As we look at the requests for the variances, and specifically Part 1 of VC 12-06 to reduce the periphery setback from 40 feet to 25 feet along the east and north property lines and 7 feet along the south property line. We feel that the applicant has not submitted credible evidence that relief, if granted, would not offend the spirit or intent of this zoning ordinance, and that there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict interpretation of this zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship. Therefore, staff recommends denial of Part 1-VC 12-06 along the east property line. The applicant has also requested that the periphery setback along the south property line be reduced from 40 feet to 7 feet and the north property line to 25 feet. Staff notes that the adjacent property to the south is within the city of Milton, but has been designated as a no-access easement with a minimum width of 50 feet and increasing in width going to the east. This property is owned by Hopewell Road Properties LLC, which is under development for the senior living facility. In regards to the north property line, there is a small strip of land adjacent to the entrance to Southfield that is a part of a lot within that subdivision. There are no improvements on this portion of the parcel, and it appears as though the applicant's property abuts the Southfield Division access road. Based on these facts, relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the zoning ordinance, and there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of this zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional Part 1-VC 12-06 along the south and north property lines. In terms of landscape strips and buffers, the applicant shall comply with Article 3 tree preservation and administrative guidelines within the zoning ordinance, which states, unless otherwise specified, lots developed with single-family detached dwelling units are not required to provide landscape areas or zoning buffers. Staff does note that a 20-foot landscape strip and fencing are required around all detention ponds. The site plan does not indicate the required landscape strip and fencing. The fencing shall be 6 foot high, 5-board equestrian-style fence with 2-inch by 4-inch welded wire constructed around it. Other site plan considerations, sidewalks. Part 2 of VC 12-062, to allow sidewalks along only one side of the street on the interior of the development, Section 64-2393. Pursuant to this section of the zoning ordinance, it requires a sidewalk that shall be constructed in accordance with the Department of Public Works standards plans, which requires sidewalks on both sides of the street. Within the City Code, Chapter 50 subdivisions, it is required that sidewalks within residential subdivisions be a minimum of 5 feet in width and a minimum 2-foot beauty strip between the sidewalk and the curb. The applicant's letter of intent states to delete sidewalks along one side of the internal streets in order to provide more green space and planting area, although it is staff's opinion that sidewalks be provided to both sides of the street to encourage a pedestrian-friendly and safe environment for the residents. Accordingly, the applicant has not submitted credible evidence that relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the zoning ordinance, and that there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or stricter application of this zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship. Therefore, staff recommends denial of Part 2-VC 12-06. Staff notes that although the site plan does not indicate sidewalks along Hopewell Road, the applicant has indicated that they will be constructed to continue the pedestrian accessibility between subdivisions along Hopewell Road and connected with the senior living facility to the south within the city of Alpharetta. Environmental site analysis. The environmental site analysis report is sufficient and satisfies the requirement of Section 64-2126. Departmental comments. City arborist. The site has about 75% tree coverage, mostly that of young pine trees. Recompense will be required, and appears that all should be able to be placed on the site. Placement and species selected for recompense shall be approved by the city arborist. Fire marshal. Based on the width of the pavement curb to curb of 24 feet, no on-street parking will be permitted. Further evaluation of the plan will be made at the time of the land disturbance permit application. Public works. Subdivision regulations require a minimum of a 100-foot radius at the center line of all curves. The curve near the stormwater facility does not appear to meet that standard. In terms of the Fulton County Board of Education, this is hard to read, but it does say that, in essence, that the impact to the Cogburn Woods Elementary School would be anywhere from 9 to 16 students. The Hopewell Middle School, anywhere from 3 to 5 students. Cambridge High School, anywhere from 7 to 10 students, for a total of 19 to 31 students. In terms of whether or not these facilities can meet the demand of these new students, the information that we did receive from the Board of Education states that both the elementary school and the middle school cannot meet that demand, however the high school could. In terms of a financial modeling, we do with every rezoning, look at the impact of the cost of services versus the amount of taxes that would be generated by this development, and we do it over a 20-year period. We estimated the cost of these homes at $350,000. That may be low, that may be accurate, but that's essentially the number we used. And based on a house of a value of $350,000 over a 20-year period, the net loss of services provided versus taxes generated comes to $117,900 approximately. In terms of public involvement, the DRB met on December the 4th, 2012 to review this, and their central question was why the applicant was requesting sidewalks on only one side of the internal streets. The CZIM meeting was held on November 28th, 2012. There were 12 residents from the community in attendance, and also staff has received several emails regarding this development, which are included in the staff report for your review. A public participation meeting was held by the applicant at the Kroger Meeting Room on Highway 9 on December the 5th, 2012. There were 4 citizens in attendance. The following was their concern: the concurrent variance to reduce the periphery setback from 40 feet to 25 feet. Standards of review. As you know, we are required to review all applications using certain standards. And based on those standards, here is our review. It has been determined that the proposed 29-lot single-family residential subdivision developed at a density of 4.18 units per acre provides a transition from the south with the senior living facility under development within the city of Alpharetta toward the medium-density single-family residential to the north and east at 2 units per acre and 2.5 units per acre, respectively. It is staff's opinion that the proposed use is suitable with adjacent and nearby developments and zonings if approved with staff's recommended conditions. It is staff's opinion that the proposal will not adversely affect existing use or usability of the adjacent properties as described above. The proposed development provides a transition between the existing densities and uses. The subject property, however, may have a reasonable use currently zoned AG1 agricultural. Staff does not anticipate, though, a significant impact on public services or utilities. Comments from the Fulton County Board of Education are included in the report as it relates to the estimated number of new students for the proposed rezoning, which will have an impact on the elementary and middle schools. The applicant will be required to provide the transportation improvements listed in the recommended conditions. These improvements will help ameliorate the increased amount of traffic created by the proposed development. The proposed development provides a transition in densities from the south to the north. If developed with the recommended conditions, it is consistent with the Georgia 400/Highway 9 LCI planning study recommendation of transition to the subject site. Transition is also recommended to the south and east of the subject site. Based on these facts, it is grounds to recommend approval for the proposed NUP neighborhood unit plan if developed with the recommended conditions. The proposed use will not be environmentally adverse to the natural resources, environment, and citizens of the city due to the required development regulations as it pertains to stormwater facilities and tree recompense and landscape requirements. Recommended conditions. For a complete list of recommended conditions, please refer to the staff report. However, highlights from the recommended conditions are as follows. The neighborhood NUP request for the neighborhood unit plan is recommended conditionally. That there be no more than 29 single-family dwelling units at a maximum density of 4.18 units per acre. Minimum perimeter setback along the south property line shall be 7 feet. Minimum perimeter setback along the north property line, 25 feet. Lots numbered 20 through 29 of the site plan submitted November 6, 2012 shall be rear-loaded alley access lots. Sidewalks shall be constructed for both sides of the streets for the entire development per City Code Chapter 50 subdivisions. There should be constructed a northbound right turn lane on Hopewell Road at a new access drive. There shall also be constructed a southbound left turn lane on Hopewell Road at the new access drive. And in conclusion, the proposed 29 single-family subdivision, if developed with the recommended conditions is consistent with the Georgia 400 State Route 9 LCI Planning Study suggestion for transitional. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional of RZ 12-16 to rezone from AG agricultural to NUP neighborhood unit plan. In addition, staff recommends denial of VC 12-16 Part 1 along the east property line and approval conditional along the south and north property lines. In addition, staff recommends denial of VC 12-16 Part 2. And that is my presentation, Mr. Chairman, and I'm certainly available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions at this point for staff? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Steve Chuck, the applicant, or Mr. Pete Hendricks.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Pete Hendricks, practice law at 6085 Lake Forest Drive in Sandy Springs. Kathy went through with great thoroughness as to the review of the application together with staff's recommendations, so I won't go over all of that with you again. I think it's important to note, you may not be aware, prior to the adoption in April of the Georgia 400 Highway 9 Master Plan Livable Centers Initiative, which is now what is instructive as to the suggested level and use of development for this property. The comprehensive land use plan was recommending office development on this piece of property. So I think the update that was adopted in April certainly lends itself to be more in keeping with the immediately surrounding area in which this property is located. As Kathy has pointed out to you, I think we're full square in compliance with what has been suggested as far as being transitioning from the south, most particularly to the north and to the east, and also the utilization of small lots for residential uses, which was suggested. But Steve has done a review and analysis of the staff recommendation, particularly with a view towards what has been recommended under the concurrent variances. And I think he can confirm to you that we will be positioned to be in keeping with staff's recommendation as far as those concurrent variances are concerned. I think really the only thing that we're out a bit on will be your conditions 3K, which is the rear-loaded alley access, and 3J, which is the requirement for sidewalks on both sides. And I'll let Steve speak to that and his concern over the inclusion of those two recommended conditions. And then after he's through, we'd like to reserve the rest of our time for rebuttal. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Steve Check, and I live at 840 Nettlebrook Lane in Milton, Georgia. And Kathy, can I have the clicker?
Oh, of course.
As Pete mentioned, as far as the recommendations that came from staff, we do agree with all of them, with the exception of the two that he mentioned. And the product that we presented, and I'm kind of go back to how we kind of came about the product that's kind of up on the screen now, and I do have some handouts if everybody wants to look at them a little more closely. Is we at first, and I do live in Milton and understand much of the architecture, and approached Robin and Kathy, and we sat down with the architect that's with Milton, and discussed what type of product would be suitable, and came up with what's in front of you, and which is in keeping with much of the architecture. You'll see there that we've got 3 different styles. Each one of these is one elevation, and we're proposing 4 homes there that each have 3 different elevations. And I'm just going to click through real quick, and you'll kind of see that on the top here, that's called our arts and crafts elevation. And down at the lower left, I believe that is our farmhouse type of elevation. And that's the colonial. So I'm just going to buzz through here. quick. And some of the architecture things that we provided within there is carriage doors, architectures, includes shutters, metal roofs, and as you can see from some of the plans in there, it's pretty detailed. And just some features for architecture that we've also included in the slides there. You know, craftsman style type of trim on the exteriors, shutters, shutter details, real shutter clips, carriage doors on the garage, front entry garages with real metal hardware, and then front doors, which we're going to accentuate with windows and side windows. So, and I can as far as size, I know that the minimum square foot is on the application is 2,000, but these homes will start greater than 2,700 square feet and range up to about 3,300 square feet. So they're not small. They're primarily four bedrooms, 3.5 bath, with one of them being 5 bedrooms and 3.5 baths. Price ranges, we do anticipate them being in the mid-threes, as Kathy mentioned, which is in keeping with what the adjacent resales are. And the other variance that we were seeking is to eliminate one side of sidewalk within the community, and you can kind of tell from our site plan. This area right here, we plan on providing sidewalk along the outside here, which connects to this sidewalk along Hopewell Road, which there's a existing sidewalk right here that comes out of the Southfield community and then connects down through here, and there is a sidewalk proposed from the apartment complex right here that comes up Hopewell Road and stops at our property. And we will be connecting these two along the frontage, and then propose keeping on the outside of the street here, and here. This is common area right here, so that seems to be a suitable place for a sidewalk. But in this area right here, it just seemed to be a little, for 29 lots, maybe a little overkill on the sidewalk. We believe that the 29 residents, if they do want to get out, can use this sidewalk on the outside and through here and go down to Hopewell Road. And I do believe that you may have to jig and jag your way across it, but the sidewalk does connect pretty much all the way down to downtown Alpharetta. So that we feel like that's a positive. I'm going to kind of defer some of the time that we have for any questions that may have following the. Well, I've been reminded, and one of the things that, you know, the rear-loaded alleys, which is lot 29, these are all front entry, and this is what we're proposing. So if that wasn't clear, I would like to mention that these are front entry garages, and that the recommendation for alley on 20 and 29, we would not want to do that.
We have 7 people wanting to speak. I apologize for my technical difficulties, but I'll have 5 minutes. It'll be 10 minutes. I just can't get it to 10. I apologize, but you will sure get your 10. So the first person.
Just let me remind the people that want to speak in opposition that 10 minutes is for everybody. So you guys need to coordinate how you want to use that amongst yourselves.
I do have one question. Mr. Johnson, do you want to speak? Because you said both yes and no. You do, okay. So the first person is Chris Straw.
Hello, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Chris Straw. I live at 2297 Milton Place in Milton Place subdivision. What I'll do here tonight, and I'll be mindful of time, is run through very quickly the highlights of a letter that we wrote to the Planning Commission that myself and 35 other members neighborhood, the Milton Place and Vickery Crest subdivisions wrote and signed to you. First off, we oppose the request in the community. One, because it's inconsistent with the desires of the community. Many of us moved to Milton from Alpharetta and Atlanta to escape the traffic and congestion, and this seems like a step right back to where we were. Secondly is traffic, which has been talked about here before, so I won't belate that, but there's a retirement community going up currently right next door to it. This community will add more traffic to an already congested area. Thirdly, location. The location of this community is right at the entrance to Milton. There's a sign there with the horse on it, and we feel that putting a high-density development right as people cross into Milton gives people a first impression that is not consistent with what we believe Milton represents. Property value impact. We're concerned about the negative potential impact of a high-density community can have on our properties. The density is significantly higher than our neighborhoods. We actually went to the Fulton County Board of Assessors page, and we pulled the information right off of that page. The average land square footage in Milton Place and Vickery Crest is about 20,000 feet. Their stated minimums are 5,000. Our average acreage is about 0.5 acres. Theirs, after we estimate, and maybe we might be wrong here, but 6.9 acres divided by 27 homes. Once you take into account roads and easements and common areas, we estimate that the average acreage is closer to 0.15. Future development. There's vacant land right next to Vickery Crest and across the street from this proposed development that represents future potential risk to us. We don't know what's going to go up there. Finally, the Georgia 400 Highway 9 plan. From the looks of the map, it looks like this proposed community would be the only community in the city of Milton as part of that plan, and the only subdivision as part of that plan in that transition zone. I'll close by just adding a couple other points I heard here tonight that concerns me. Is the findings were that the elementary and middle school couldn't handle the additional children. And secondly, it sounds like I missed the time period of the projection, but there's a net loss on this development from a tax base perspective. So I'm kind of scratching my head as to why this would be a good idea for Milton. And finally, whatever's decided going forward, I would ask if it does go forward, that the minimum square footage and lot sizes be raised up to what they're actually claiming they will be. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Matt Hobbs. We have approximately 6.5 minutes left.
Good evening, Matt Hobbs, 2337 Milton Place. I'm also one of the co-signers on the letter that Chris Straw just referenced, and I will be deferring the majority of my time back to the other speakers, but I did want to make a comment. I didn't see any proof tonight why there needs to be a sidewalk, only one sidewalk. It wasn't even presented to the public. It was presented to the council only, and we saw elevations and we saw some shutters. I don't feel like the concerns were addressed to the group tonight. Thank you for the time.
And the next person is Tricia O'Mara.
My name is Tricia O'Mara, 2334 Milton Place. I am one of the other co-signers on Chris Straw's neighborhood letter that he submitted and in support of that letter. When we first moved into Milton 2 years ago, we felt that we had found a gem. In reading off your website, your vision statement for Milton is that it's a distinctive community, embracing small town life and heritage while preserving and enhancing our rural character. I feel that the Beazer proposal really negates your vision statement, and it's not what we're so proud to have moved into. We feel that with this development, it goes against what your vision statement represents. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Tim O'Mara.
Tim O'Mara, 2334 Milton Place. I'm also a co-signer on the letter that you received. I'm going to defer most of my time since most of my points have already been made. But again, I stress that I started here 2 years ago, and all I can tell you is the traffic level on Hopewell Road is becoming really very difficult and dangerous in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Anita Carvey.
Good evening. Anita Carvey, 890 Southfield Lane. My husband, son, and I live directly adjacent to this property on the east side. And our main concern is, here in the city of Milton, we're all about sensible and smart development. This is neither sensible nor smart to rezone the AG1 to housing and the variance for the setbacks. We think it's definitely not smart to squeeze 29 homes in a small sliver of land right up against an existing subdivision, a new retirement facility with over 130 units, and a busy city road that other people have already pointed out is getting busier by the day. We're very concerned about the traffic. We're concerned about the density of all of this, and we understand that Milton would like to have various types of housing to accommodate lots of different people. We just don't think this is the way to do it, to cram all of these homes into a small piece of land. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Kevin Box.
Hi, I'm Kevin Box. Live in Vickery Crest. I'm also a co-signer in the initial letter, living at 252 Woodliff Court in Vickery Crest subdivision. A couple things just real quick. When I first moved here, I think looking at the zoning, all the different neighborhoods that surround us, one thing was very common, that if you look at all the neighborhoods, all the lots that are on Hopewell Road all have acre minimums. So if you look on our subdivision, you'll see acre all fronting Hopewell Road. This subdivision is literally directly across the street. So we would go from 1 acre over here that was mandated, further in the neighborhood where either, you know, a third of an acre, half an acre, that size, but over on this proposed Beezer, it would be, you know, 1/9 of it, which doesn't really make sense. Why would you require 1 acre on this side of the road, 1/9 of an acre, or whatever it would be on this side of the road? It just doesn't mix. Then the only other point that hasn't been covered that I want to cover is in the comparison of properties. Number one, most of these higher density things are in Alpharetta. If you go to the east, I don't really think that's a fair comparison because east of us is Highway 9, and these other subdivisions that are being compared to are Highway 9 entry. So if I look at Hopewell Road and sort of what I see versus driving down Highway 9, I see Highway 9 commercial, Hopewell Road, less, you know, more rural, less dense, that type of thing. And that's it for me. I'll leave the rest of the time for everybody else.
Okay, the last speaker is Clyde Johnson.
Yes, Clyde Johnson, 515 Wells Springs Court, Hopewell Place. We abut Southfield. The Homeowners Association is against this proposal. On a personal note, while I see some merit in a transition to the density, I don't think this track is suitable for it. I'm opposed to any variance on this property. A variance, just like your planning commissioner said, should be given only if it's so detrimental to the use of the property under that zoning that it can't be used. In this case, you could put 20 houses on it and not need any variances. And that's what we're opposed to, is the variances. I do understand that they did reduce the 40-foot, the east side variance is out, right? You're not recommending approval of the variance along the east side of the property. That's going to be 40 feet. Okay. Also, the traffic is a big concern. Vickery Crest, Milton, is it Milton Close? Hopewell Place in Southfield, we're going to be coming to the city with petitions to have Hopewell Place, Hopewell Road, the speed limit changed to 35 miles an hour. It's a death trap out there now, and we're just introducing more traffic to it. So I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
And that's the end of the speakers. No, I'm sorry. Sure. Okay.
I'm Michelle Tubbs. I am at 780 Southfield Lane. I'm a homeowner. I am also the president of our HOA association. I'd first like to thank Beezer because they have been working with us pretty diligently to try and come up with some compromises. Because on behalf of the subdivision, I have to echo the concerns that have been brought up by a number of the other members tonight. The density issues, the setback issues, the severe difference in transition from what you see along the rest of Hopewell and suddenly being put onto this small piece of property was a real shock when the notices came out to us. We'd like to continue to work with both the builder and the community planning center to come up with compromises that we think can all be fair and reasonable both parties. We don't think we're quite there yet, and we'd like to continue those discussions if at all possible. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that, one more?
My name is Sherry Gardner. I live at 2344 Milton Place. I'm a teacher in the area. This is the third time I've moved back to this area. I chose to move back to this area for the quality of life. I chose to live in a neighborhood that supports a family atmosphere, not small lots, nice open area, and this is disappointing to me. And I'm sitting here and I'm very sad that we're actually even thinking about this. This is not what I thought Milton was. And when I moved back the third time, I looked at the website. This is the area I wanted to live in. I did not want to live in a smushed area. The schools have changed. I see it every day. I see the change that we have seen in Milton, and I just don't think this is the right fit for this area.
Time is up.
Okay. The applicant want to use the rest of their time?
2:38.
Just quickly from my perspective, then I'll ask Steve step up and speak to the issues he's got. If I could remind you to go back, that before in April, the adoption of the Georgia Highway 400, Highway 9 LCI, the recommendation on this piece of property was office. I think we have come to a much better suggested level of density. It specifically cites it as being transitional for residential with small lots. And that's exactly the application that you have in front of you. Earlier, comment was made about, well, would you be willing to be conditioned to the minimum 2,700 square feet that was described by Mr. Check? And yes, we would be willing to be conditioned to the minimum 2,700 square feet. With that, I would like Steve to step up and say what he has to say on the rear entry alleyway. You've got the Crabapple community that, with the rework that you have done with your comprehensive plan and your code, it's now described for that area to be rear entry and to be alley access. And you'll have a walkable, livable community with that in that area. To impose that on this particular piece of property in this area would be odd guy out. It would just, not only is it not a product that the applicant is engaged with, but the end result of the development would not be what you're striving for in Crabapple, which I think is entirely appropriate.
Just to follow up a little bit, and I know somebody had commented about just the application as far as who the buyer would be. This is a family buyer community. We've done a lot of market research, and do believe that the product that we're proposing does attract the family buyer. Like I said, 4 bedrooms or greater, 3.5 baths. Many of these will have basements on them that will attract that type of family buyer. So, in kind of follow up what Pete had said, that the front entry garage with more of a backyard is going to have a little bit more of a family feel to it, and that the alley is a little bit more of an urban type of feel, and is probably more suited for somebody who does not have families. So, I think my time is up. And any questions, we can reply.
4 seconds left.
Okay. We're out of time, so we need a motion to close public hearing.
I move we close public comment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Questions? Mr. Edwards?
I have right now. Go ahead.
Okay.
Pass.
Paul?
Not sure I'm ready yet, George.
Okay, let me ask one, if I can, of staff. We did talk about it in our work session, but I'm just curious, on the northern end of this property, the there's a pipeline shown feeding the stormwater retention basin.
Correct.
Is that line in existence?
You could ask the applicant's engineer, he's present.
Okay. I'm asking about the line that's shown in the, actually in the upper part of your drawing that is feeding your retention basin from the northeast.
This line.
Sorry?
I believe you're talking about this line right here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yes, it is existing.
How much of that's existing? All of it?
Yeah, and I brought with us, if you have any questions about detention, Daryl Cook, who's our project civil engineer. But this line this was Southfield Lane right here, and there is a pipe that's existing that goes underneath that road.
And where does that pipeline currently stop? I mean, there's no retention basin there now, is there? It
Crosses underneath the road, starts, I'm going to say it starts here, and then it goes here, and then it ends probably about, I would say probably 50 feet on the north side of Southfield Lane.
What's the purpose of that line now? Is that piping that creek?
There,
Or that,
there's no creek there.
well, at the upper end, off your property up in Southfield?
Up here?
Yeah, on the other side of the driveway.
The water flows this way, the gradient of the property falls this way, and then, if there is any water, which there rarely is, it goes to the north.
Okay, so that line already has an easement
Yes.
on, across the,
Yes. Yes, there's a
flag lot?
There's a storm sewer, sanitary storm sewer easement that comes here, and it basically stops right at our property.
Okay. So is that where the overflow from your retention pond would discharge?
Yes.
Okay. The other question I had before we open it up, the arborist made a comment in here that I didn't quite understand, that said that it was, his opinion was that all of the recompense, or all of the trees that were going to be taken out of the recompense as a result of that would be able to be placed on the site. Where are you proposing to put all these trees to replace everything that's coming down?
We are proposing, there are, along the front of the lots, the rear lots, and this common area right here, which is kind of a vacant open field right now, is going to handle probably most of that recompense.
Okay. Do you have a floor plan for any of these homes?
I do, but it's probably not attached to that package, but I do have floor plans. I can email, send them, anything you like. Sure.
Okay.
I'm ready for one. Do you know the approximate size that and you're calling it open common area to the right of the drive coming in, and you're calling it open common to the left of the drive coming in as well. But then I just heard you say a moment ago that that's likely to be a receiving area for a lot of the recompense from the
This right
trees?
here is. I'm sorry, the recompense area, there's a tree line, there's an old existing house, and right about here is the driveway. Anything to the north of that, going this way, is wooded, and we don't plan on taking the woods out of that area between these trees right here. We do want to preserve that. But there is quite an area right between here and here that's just basically open field. I believe it was just old farmland that much of these, many of these trees would be going in. And I do believe that the count is somewhere between 40 and 50 trees of 4-inch trees.
Okay, so that's the receiving area of the
Yes.
trees. I guess, where I'm finding some inconsistency is we're talking about this being I think you suggested that the likely buyer is family.
Right.
And they're 3 to 4 bedroom homes.
4 to 5.
4 to 5 bedroom homes. Fulton County's estimate is only, I think, a maximum of 30 children. I guess where I'd like to get a better sense from you is, how is this how does this really represent a family setting with virtually no front yard, no backyard, no side yard? You just filled up your receiving areas with trees. Where are these kids going to be? They're going to be on the streets, which are narrow, and the recommendation from staff, or I think requirement from staff, is no street parking. How is that a family setting?
Well, it's a good question. But there is, we have laid them out with, there is backyards, and if there is, buyers that do want to provide some fencing for their backyards where their kids can go. These lots right along here I keep hitting this up, are deep enough to provide backyards. This area right here is going to be, we are going to provide trees, but it's not going to be full of trees. There's going to be areas that are going to be open with grass, and we haven't come up with a full design, but areas where there can be more of a passive area.
If I look at the chart though, or look at your site plan, the area to the right of the drive is probably about 160 by about 80. And this room is about 60 by 60. So this is about 2/3. The space in this room is about 2/3 of that space. I guess where I'm struggling is I'm just not thinking this is a very family-friendly development. I think that you've got a pretty intense presentation of home, 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 concrete, 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 car, car, car. Yeah. Not a lot of green space.
The lot
size
size
and as the gateway to Milton,
yeah.
It's one of the first developments that you'll see coming up Hopewell from the transition from Alpharetta. And you as a Milton resident, is this really what you saw as Milton?
Well, what I saw as Milton is a possibility of something of higher use. As you notice here, we've got next to us a pretty massive structure that's 3 stories high. That is, I don't know what the density is on it, but it's got to be close to 20 units to the acre. And yes, I do drive by this property a lot, and my concern was, is that a possibility? So early on in my discussion was what can be utilized here that's more of a transition zoning. As it speaks to lot sizes, there are some communities within the city of Milton that do have lot sizes that are compatible to this, that do attract a family buyer. Crabapple Crossroads is an example of that. That is a family buyer that is buying there. So there are some compatible size lot size communities within this area that do attract. It's just maybe not, the size that you're thinking.
I would just politely remind you that some of the densities we're talking about are the maximums that are allowed under the NUP, and that maybe a friendlier approach in working with the community might be a consideration of
sure.
lower densities that might provide an easier transition and more acceptable to the neighbors immediately adjacent to it.
Believe me, I live here, and have had a lot of dealings with staff, and I'm a Milton resident, and I have reached out to the communities. We've had several meetings that I have sent out invites to show product, show our plan, and I do believe it was received well. And I would continue to do that if we need to. As Michelle mentioned, I spent a good deal of time with them and their community on a Saturday morning where it started to rain on us. And I'm open to working with the community. Like I said,
so density is one of those things that you're still willing to consider?
I can consider that, but the fact that how this transitions from an apartment, I think, has to be an open mind for all of us.
And Mr. Check came to me in working with this plan early on. My name's Daryl Cook. I'll give you a yellow card as well. But his first order was, we want to buffer anything that we do. We want to create an open space, something that's what you see first. That's kind of the image. that you'll get when you come through. You'll see the 3-story apartment, then you'll see basically a park. That's what you'll see first, and it will be, there'll be some lawns and whatnot, but it'll be enough trees there that will effectively screen that view of the homes block. But you'll still be able to see through. But his initial intent was, I don't want these lots up here. We want to create that park setting, that look. Very concerned about the image of Milton, and that was an absolute must throughout land planning of this site. Absolute must was to create that image and that view as you drive by.
Yeah, one of the things we did initially is, and I had a first plan that I came up with, which I did not like. It was more of a cul-de-sac, and I said I don't want any homes to back up. We were looking at the back of the homes, so all of these lots right here front out. So we'll be seeing porches and the front elevations of each one of those homes. This doesn't show it well, but this area right here is the buffer that is between here. And I have reviewed that plan, and the plan there is to plant mostly white pines, and I can't remember the Nelly Stevens, Hollies, or whatever. And so that is how we've gotten here, and like I said, I'd be willing to work with the community.
And do you have any concern about the fact that with the current plan, there is no allowed street parking? How does somebody entertain, or how does somebody host a relative or out-of-town guest?
Well, there's 4 parking spots per home. Okay, there's a garage and a driveway. So there's four per home.
Let me ask staff a question. Would that be the first of its kind in Milton where we have no street parking allowed?
Also, the only other subdivision that you've looked at since we've been in the city is Milton Preserve, which is across from Crooked Creek. It's very similar development. They have double garages and just enough for 2 parking spots on the pad. So that's the other.
No
where
parking.
It was for no parking. It's also narrow streets, very similar to this.
Okay, thank you. George, I'm okay for the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the questions I have is, I've seen developments similar to this, but where they did have backside parking garages, and the area where you currently have the streets is more like sidewalks and a community area. Did you consider anything like that when you were drawing up this design?
Could you kind of?
Well, first of all, did you consider making all of these with backside garages?
No.
You did not. I think that would have been a good consideration. You could have, your density could have stayed fairly close to being the same without having those front entry garages.
Yeah, the one part of it is these slope off considerably in the back. In order to try and get a road back there, I think would have been problematic. And then plus the additional for an alley type product, you do need a front road and a back road. So you're doubling up on the road frontage and impervious areas.
Why do you need it back in the front? Why do you need it back in the front?
Where do the kids play?
George.
Where do the kids go?
Well, like I mentioned, we do believe that we have sufficient backyard, and we've created some open space. This, once again, I think this is compatible with some of the consistent communities that like Crabapple Crossroads and Milton Place.
George? Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
Steve, a couple
Yes.
of questions. I believe we mentioned that you're going to have a right turn.
Yes. We're right turn and left turn lanes.
And there will be a left turn lane.
Yes.
On the other. And we talked about that at the public meeting. A couple of things. Are you clear on the distance, excuse me, the distance of the entryway to Vaughn Road?
Yes.
Which has to be under ordinance of 300 feet?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but yes, we have done a distance study, and it's definitely meets that criteria.
And the other, just as point, one of the people suggested, you have 35 mile per hour on that, and it's 45.
45, yeah.
at that
Our plan
area.
does show 35, but it is 45.
Right.
It's 35 at the other side of the city line.
Correct.
Yeah,
So
yes.
it's 35 right here, and then
Right.
in front of this, it should be posted, it is posted.
That's all I have, George, right now. Chris?
Any other questions? What is the name of the applicant for this?
what is my name, or
No,
the
no,
name
what's
is?
the name of
it's,
the applicant?
Beazer Homes is the applicant.
Is that a corporation, LLC, LLC?
It is a corporation.
So Beazer Homes is not the legal name of the applicant?
What is our legal name? The legal name?
The legal name. Is it perhaps Beazer Homes USA, INC period?
I do have our division
Beazer
president here.
Homes USA is the parent company's publicly traded entity.
Well, is it Beazer Homes USA or Beazer Homes USA, INC period?
Corp is the entity that owns properties within the state of Florida.
Who's the applicant?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. We can find out.
Beazer Homes. I believe that the app, we put down in the application that it's Beazer Homes.
Does Beazer Homes exist legally? I suggested to you that it doesn't.
I understand what you're saying.
On the application, it also, you're not the landowner, you're the petitioner. And one of the requirements is that if you're not the landowner, you attach a copy of the sales contract. I didn't see it here in the packet.
We can, we certainly can provide that. We are under contract with the current owner.
I'll just have to check about that. So,
What are we checking?
well, I believe that if the applicant signs or the owner signs for it, then there's not necessity to have a contract. If, let's say if it was just Beazer Homes, then they would have to have a copy of the purchase agreement.
A lot of times, and there's good rationale behind supplying a copy of the contract, when you don't have that owner step up, because you got to look at that contract to be certain that it's got the requisite language in there, providing a power of attorney to the applicant to be able to pursue the contract. And it's really important, if they don't have an independent power of attorney attached from the owner, to see that that contract provides that they've got the right to bring it forward, absent the owner signing it.
Okay. That's all I have, George.
George, let's go back again and ask, Steve, you said that there is no way on the sidewalk, with the possibility, as I look at this, in reducing considerably, I guess you would say, the density to allow for this sidewalks on both sides?
The purpose for the reason for just doing it one side was, I don't believe had a density reason. It was, there's 29 lots, and having it both sides just seemed to be a little much, and I can understand if it was 200 homes, and there was a lot of walking traffic with 200 homes, two sides would be appropriate. Over 29, so it didn't have a density motive there.
Well, but my point being, if you consider lowering the density, then that would enable it to possibly have
I see what you're saying.
sidewalks on both sides.
Possibly, but I think if it's lowered, then there's lower units, and therefore, the way I'm proposing it is with 29 lots on one side is sufficient. And if it's lowered, I still believe that one side is sufficient.
And the sidewalk will physically fit, it's just more impervious, and the sensibility of, do you need sidewalk on both sides of the road? And some of the road doesn't even have lots fronting on it. So, why have two when we can put one strategic that cuts down on impervious area and yet still more than adequately services the very small density of this, the number of units within this area, I would say. To me, it just makes more sense in limiting impervious area as well. It just makes sense. We keep throwing more in alleys, and it's just more impervious area. And one of the reasons we've done this, the way we've done it, is preservation. Working with parks, trying to keep open space here, preserve trees in strategic areas. And we can do it. It's just generally at some expense of green. That's the reason.
I got to just make a couple of comments. I don't really think I have any more questions, but the houses that you've shown us, I think, look very nice. But it's a whole different aesthetic when they're 14 feet apart and you've got a whole bunch of them together. And the comment was made that when you come past the new assisted living facility, that you're going to see a park. And I guess to me, what I'm going to see is garage doors. At least that's what I think I'm going to see. Is the current residence visible from the street?
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Well, I mean, it's not. The current residents.
Obviously I drive by it not obviously, I do drive by it every day, twice. And it's visible, but it's not, prominent, shall we say.
No.
But there's a lot of trees that are gonna come down between that existing residence and the street. And based on what you described about where you're replacing trees, they're not gonna be in front of the houses, they're gonna be over in the corner. So that, again, from my standpoint, I'm envisioning a whole string of garage doors. 2,700 square feet, unless I did the math wrong, 2,700 square feet is the size of the building envelope on these lots. Their build is 5,000 square foot lots, but the building envelope itself is about 2,700 square feet. And that's taken 14 feet off of the width and 25 feet off of the length. It's about 2,700 square feet. So you're proposing a 2,700 square foot house, granted 2 stories, on a 2,700 square foot building envelope.
They're correct. They're 2 stories.
No.
So.
It's just real tight. I don't have any personal belief that the 2 sides of the street need to have sidewalks. I personally think that having rear access to these houses, particularly the ones that are facing Hopewell Road, is a much more important criteria here than having the sidewalks. And that's one of the conditions that staff's recommended, and I personally support that. Again, more from the aesthetic of what's facing Hopewell Road, but that's just my opinion. I'd like to make sure before we do anything in terms of a motion here, to ask you if you could to repeat which of these conditions that staff has recommended you are agreeable to and which ones you do not feel you either can or want to meet. I think I heard you say you were willing to change the minimum heated floor area to 2,700, but other than that, which of these are objectionable?
The alley, lots 20 and 29.
It's 3J, okay.
Yeah. And the condition, we had requested a variance to go for from 2 to 1 side sidewalks. And those are the only things that, that staff has recommended that we'd like changed.
Okay.
George, I have another question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Robin or Kathy, can you help me understand, on page 16, the Public Works Department comment, subdivision regulations require a minimum of 100-foot radius to the center line of all curves. The curve near the stormwater facility does not appear to meet that standard. Can you help me better understand that, please?
Basically, it's exactly where it's stated, it's that northwest corner. So if you take it basically isn't a wide enough curve, so if you took a radius of 100 feet, it's gonna bubble out and be a larger turn. So it doesn't meet the street standards for.
I can comment. That is another recommendation that we agree with, and it is right here. So instead of this being more of a right turn here, it's got more of a curve here.
Right.
Okay.
And we agree.
Take a 100-foot radius and kind of bubbles out, so it has more radius to turn.
I think the concern was, is this someplace where somebody stops? And so we met with Public Works, and that is something a recommendation we agree with.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
George, please. Robin, I think in staff's assessment there, one point, I didn't make note of the page. Staff noted there was no landscape strip or fencing around the retention pond. Has that been resolved?
Well, I mean, it's not shown, but it's a part of the conditions that they would have to provide that. That's also, so that's toward the end of the conditions.
Okay.
It would have to be fenced. I think it's a 6-foot high
Yep.
floorboard
Yep.
wire fence. So.
Okay, and you guys are okay with that condition? That's a standard condition, that's not new.
Standard, it's in the ordinance, but it's
Yeah.
basically around here that and it's consistent with the fence. You can't see it too well probably on your plan, but this gets the Milton 4-rail horse fence, and that would be around the pond too. And I believe there's a 20-foot landscaping around that too.
Okay. I think that's it for me, George. Thank you.
Anybody want to put forth a motion?
I will, George. I move that we recommend denial of RZ 12-16, VC 12-06.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Motion is made by Commissioner Kramer, seconded by Commissioner Doty. Discussion. I will just reiterate, I guess, my own concern. I mean, I think a transitionary use here is a good thing, but I think if you go back to page 5 here and look at the way transition area is defined in the LCI study, it's lower scale development with appropriate buffers to residential neighborhoods. And as I said a few minutes ago, in my opinion, this doesn't really fit that. It could, I think, if the density was reduced and there were some of the aesthetics added into the development, but that's my personal opinion. Any other comments, discussion? There's a motion on the floor that we deny the request for rezoning RZ 1216/VC 12-06. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Next item, Robin, please.
The next item is a text amendment, RZ 12-18, to amend Chapter 44, Article 6, Division 2, AG1, as it pertains
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. The first text amendment, RZ 12-18, is in terms, this text amendment only applies to properties zoned AG1. And within this text amendment, the goal was to allow other types of fencing, including opaque fencing, on the interior of platted subdivisions. But when those lots abut exterior streets such as Birmingham, Hopewell, and Freemanville roads, they will be required to provide the 3 or 4 board equestrian-type fence. Also, during the next cycle, staff will initiate a new text amendment to create a definition for exterior streets, which would be any street not located within a residential subdivision. So essentially what we've been asked to do by the City Council is to relook at the fence requirements. They thought they were too stringent, especially as related to interior streets within the subdivisions. Not all subdivisions want equestrian-style fencing. However, on the main roads, the thought of carrying out that equestrian look is certainly something they want to continue, but they want some flexibility. So this proposed change to the text is to allow that flexibility. And if you look at page 3, it does talk about the intent to do that. It also talks about the fact that in a side or rear yard adjacent to an exterior street, an opaque fence may be installed as long as it is not visible from the street at any time of the year. So the idea is to change this to allow for the equestrian only in the front of exterior streets, but even if you're on an exterior street, your side and rear fence can be opaque as long as it's covered with plantings and no one can see it. And then if you're on an interior street, you can do a different style as long as you maintain the height maximum that we're allowing. So that is essentially the gist of the changes.
Kathy, may I ask a question, George?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, absolutely.
You had me until the very last comment about the interior street again. Can you say that again?
On the interior streets, the height of the interior, Robin, help me, the interior streets, if you're on an interior street, you can have a height of up to
8 feet.
8 feet.
That's what the ordinance currently.
Right.
But, okay.
Right. So we're basically just anything that's exterior and then you can see from the primary road.
Yeah.
And it has to be equestrian. Everything on the interior can be what a homeowner would want it to be.
Have we had, are we to the point we're asking questions?
Sure.
Have we had requests for that from the community, or is this just something that we're hypothetically thinking is important?
My understanding is that people have approached members of the City Council with this issue, and the City Council did ask us to look at it to see how we could make the ordinance more flexible.
What it basically says is, today, where one of the things that we've been talking about historically is to ensure that we preserve, rural vistas and that sight lines to trees and to open space are not compromised. And so this is what we're going, is we're actually going backwards. We're introducing the opportunity for an opaque fence where there wasn't one before, right?
For interior platted subdivisions, and that was.
And exterior on corners, right?
As long as it's not an exterior street.
And as long as you can't see it.
Right, and can't see it means it has to be planted to that.
Mhm.
And so does that mean you're planting mature trees and shrubs where if it's 8 feet tall,
it's got to be
to meet visibly screened
Mhm.
from day one that you build that
Maybe
fence.
some type of evergreen.
Day
Yeah.
one and 365 days a year.
Yeah, that's significant that we're asking for.
On both sides of the fence?
Well, I mean, it would
No,
be
from
on
the
the
road.
exterior, so
From the
you
road,
wouldn't see it.
So you couldn't see it. If you were the public driving by, you couldn't see it.
But if I were a neighbor, I would see it.
Yes.
Right,
If
Bill
my-
was saying from the street.
And it also talks about that barbed wire is prohibited on any single-family residential lot, and chain link fences are prohibited.
Kathy, it's just one of those things where, it's one of my pet peeves where, is it something that's a standard, or is it one of those things where we can accommodate it, where somebody comes in and asks for an exception? Why do we have to write it in as a standard when our ordinance allows for hearings to
Yeah, you have to
accommodate
go,
exceptions?
you would have to go to the BZA.
Yeah.
And the issue is, how much of a hardship is that? And I think there was some thought that, could we look at being a little more flexible, build it into the ordinance without having the necessity of going to the BZA?
But I mean, so the HOA would trump this though, right? So if your
Correct. I mean,
HOA
if
says
the
you
HOA
can't have
says-
opaque fences
Then you
bordering
could.
the
It could
rear of
make-
your
the HOA
property.
could make it more restrictive, yeah.
They are. I mean,
Right.
there's no 8-foot fences.
That's what I was gonna say, in any of our,
But right now, if you're an
Right.
HOA, our ordinance says that you've got to have an equestrian fence on your interior lot. And a
yeah,
lot
which
of these,
none of my neighbors have that. The
You know.
fences they have up are all the, wrought
Right,
iron
if
or
they were-
fake wrought
so
iron.
This, I think this amendment was done back last spring, so anybody
Yeah,
who
before
came
that.
since then would be required to do this. It was just.
So if
you
you
know,
had,
I've
so if I
spoken-
put a pool in my backyard now and I've got to fence the perimeter of the pool, I'd have to have an equestrian style fence?
Well, you're
Under
not,
the
you're not,
current-
you're not AG1. You have to remember this only applies to
Gotcha,
AG1.
okay.
So, the denser developments aren't gonna be
Right.
required to do this.
Okay.
I've got a couple of questions. I want to make sure that, first, from a construction standpoint, that what's here is intended. So when I look at the text of K, and it talks about notwithstanding the requirements of J,
1 through 4, yeah.
fences located in a platted subdivision not required to comply with subsection J 1 through 4. Do we mean 1 through 4, or do we mean 1 through 6? Is the 1 through 4 reference intentional?
Well, 1 through 4 is that, we will always not allow chain link fences and always require that they be 3 feet away from the right of way. So
Gotcha,
saying that,
yeah.
does that make sense? So that, notwithstanding the requirements of subdivision, fences located on lots in a platted subdivision are not required to comply with 1 through 4, but they still have to comply that you can't have.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
So the 1 through 4 is intentional, right?
right.
Correct.
Okay. My issue with the whole K part of this, and maybe it's just me, I don't like the idea of approving this with exterior street being an undefined term. And I appreciate the fact that it's gonna come next time, and I appreciate the fact that it's gonna be something like any street not located within a residential subdivision, but to me, we're putting the cart before the horse to approve this without knowing what that definition is.
You could defer it until it catches up.
Well, that's just me. It's
That's
a
a good
critical
point.
element here to me of what this means, and to the extent that exterior street doesn't get defined in the way we think it's gonna be, I may not feel as comfortable with this being the way it's written.
Well, it goes to my point that I made earlier in the pre-meeting, is what's happening to some of the stuff that's coming before us. We're not seeing plans that are as comprehensively finalized as we used to see. We're asking on, in many cases, good faith to accept some of these things. I don't think we're serving the community very well when we are asked to, on so many things, have a vision for it that's shared by the applicant, and yet we're trying to make black and white decisions. So I would echo what George is saying about this. I sure would love for it to catch up. I will tell you that crossed my mind as I was preparing for the meeting today as well. That I just think that we got to have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. I'd be more comfortable with that.
Sure.
The other part of this is, and again, I'm probably not reading it the way it was intended, but when I read the Romanet, or the number 1 underneath K, if the side or rear yard is adjacent to an exterior street, so let's say that it backs up to an exterior street, an opaque fence may be installed along that exterior street is what this is intended to say, is that correct?
That's correct.
So it says nothing necessarily. It means that they could install opaque fence around the other three sides of the property, and this doesn't even speak to that, right?
Well, it's not along the exterior street.
Yeah. So they
That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah, so
the other
that's
three
fine.
sides can be opaque. They don't have to be shielded from view
No.
or anything else, as long as they're not along an exterior street.
It can't be seen.
Well, yeah, they can be seen. That's my
Yeah,
point.
yeah, that-
They
It-
can be
It's only
seen.
one
It's only the
side
one
of
along
the-
the exterior street. And I don't like
So you can
that.
tick off your neighbor by putting up a huge opaque fence and
Yeah.
not have to screen it.
As long as I'm not on a
For
public street.
everybody driving by.
I mean, as long as I'm not on an exterior street, sorry.
Yeah. That's what that says.
And if the exterior streets are, if I go back to the cover email, if the exterior streets are like Birmingham, Hopewell, and Freemanville Road, that means anything, once you leave the main thoroughfare, can have opaque fence all around it if they want to.
Yeah, remember the
Including the
discussion we
front.
had about Taylor Road?
Including the front yard.
Yeah. Remember the Taylor Road discussion
Oh,
about
yeah.
the
Yeah.
landscaping business and how we really struggled what to do with that because we talked about it being like a stockade?
Yeah.
This is,
They're gonna make a comment that Taylor Road would be considered an exterior street because it's not within a platted subdivision, that's just
right,
FYI.
that's my point.
Yes.
And we found it pretty offensive. And we were trying to mitigate some of the things that we found so offensive. We talked to the guy about having to change, some of the things and paint it or stain it or whatever, and it was, it was a stockade. And what we're doing here is inviting stockades again. Well, right now, we've done a pretty good job of prohibiting or limiting that, or actually not, we prohibited it, except for on an exception basis, where I would love to see us not necessarily take this forward with putting this back in for the purpose of, that's why other boards exist, is you deal with the anomaly on a one-off basis, rather than whitewashing something and saying, yeah, it's okay as long as you meet all this stuff, and suddenly it's much more available, rather than on a considered and assessed and carefully analyzed basis.
So would you consider somebody asking, going to the Board of Zoning Appeals, what's their hardship, other than that they prefer to have a?
I would rather, I mean, if it were me, I'd rather set it up so that we're dealing with it more as an administrative variance, so they don't have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
But even under an administrative variance, you still have to meet, they have the same considerations.
But it's Kathy's decision
Yeah.
for an administrative variance as opposed to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
George, would you just clarify, a couple of sentences ago, you said that you could put an opaque fence around the entire yard, including the front?
Yes, if my property, the way I read this, if my property doesn't touch an exterior street, if I'm within a platted subdivision,
Right.
what prevents me from putting an opaque fence around my whole property?
Nothing, unless the HOA excludes it.
Well, okay, yeah, but I'm
Well,
saying this.
like Brittle Road's a gravel road, so why couldn't I put a 8-foot front fence in front of
And
my
I
property?
think, well, and I think that was an example, because technically that's not a.
It's not a platted
It's not a
subdivision.
platted subdivision, but
Right.
also some of those Brittle Road residences are multi-million-dollar houses that they don't want an equestrian fence, they want a metal.
Well,
stud-
but
yeah.
that was Chris's point. I'm more inclined to go the other way. I don't like opaque fences, I think,
Right.
but I don't like the idea of restricting everybody to being a four-board equestrian fence. I think wrought iron fences and things like that are perfectly appropriate. So,
Yeah, let me remind you too, how offensive we've all found the monster wall over at Atlanta National that's halfway constructed. Remember the Mr. Rogers neighborhood house that was in transition? How-
It's still in transition, and
Yeah.
they're still working on it.
you like the one on Cogburn Road?
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's the vi-
There's another one.
That's the
Yeah, no,
vision.
Yeah, right
That's-
at Atlanta
yeah,
National.
that was a
That's the
variance.
Main entrance, the house immediately to the left.
I haven't been over there in a
Yeah,
while.
Yeah.
you can see it.
But that was a variance, they
Yeah,
got a
they got a
variance, there's nothing we
variance.
could have done with that one. I mean, they went to the BZA and got
And the
that.
BZA granted them that variance.
Right. But I see that apparently it wasn't carefully considered like I might have hoped it would have been.
Well,
And it didn't have the requirement that it be screened 100% of the time.
Do you have any other direction, aside from the fact that you'd like to wait for the exterior street definition to catch up? But anything else you'd like us to tweak on this while we're at it before it comes back again? Or is it just
My
philosophically?
personal inclination is at the other end of the spectrum, not to allow opaque fencing except by variance, and to allow different types of fencing than just for board and equestrian fencing, because I think it's more appropriate.
So we could put in, all opaque fencing be not permitted, but other ones, we could do it.
I'm
that
just
way.
saying that's
Yeah.
me. I would prefer
No,
to
I
see
agree.
more choices in fencing, but opaque isn't one of them.
Yeah. But that could be an option we could work on.
Yeah, I mean, if that's, you'd rather go in that direction, we could certainly work with that.
I don't know, George, we've done I understand what you're saying too. And I guess I would ask the question again, how many applications have we had? Or how many times has somebody come forward and said, I really can't deal with your four-board fence?
Well,
And if they do,
I'll
I mean, there's-
personalize it. I mean, within the last year and a half, I fenced in my backyard, and I didn't want to put up a four-board fence, but I had no choice. I mean, I didn't want to go through the process of getting a variance to
Okay.
be able to put up something else.
but you could have.
Oh, yeah, I could
Yeah,
have.
Yeah.
I could have.
That's kind of where I was going with it. And then maybe we decide, maybe the
My
process needs
objection
to
to
be
that,
changed.
though, particularly since it's not even visible from the street,
Right.
is that shouldn't be regulated. It ought to be my choice.
Yeah, but on those that are visible from the street, where we are trying to create a consistent
No
look
argument.
and aesthetic
No argument.
across the community, I don't want to be quick to compromise that. But to your point, I think when it's not visible from the street.
No, if I was a spiteful person and we passed this, then I would go put a stockade fence around
Yeah.
my front yard.
Yeah, because you could. Well, except for the fact that we have
because,
covenants
you're
that
a
you couldn't.
platted subdivision, you're AG1, so you can put it as long as you can, you're a platted subdivision, so you can do whatever you want.
And your neighbors would shoot you.
Although,
Or our covenant.
funny you say
Covenant.
that,
Ours won't
because
either.
the gated part of
I
our
wouldn't know ours
subdivision
is.
is not AG1, it's CUP.
I know, so that doesn't apply to them.
Right.
Okay, well, you've given us
Anyway.
some direction,
Well, the
and we'll
private
be
streets,
glad to
yeah.
take this back. and-
Okay, we don't need a motion for that, we've just
Well,
had
we do need a
discussion.
motion.
All right.
If you so choose to defer.
I move we defer this to the
February.
the next meeting where we have the definition of exterior
February.
streets.
Yeah.
Okay, February.
So I think that would be both RZ 1218 and RZ 1219, because they both make reference to exterior streets, and
I agree.
therefore,
Okay.
I
Agree.
think the definition needs to follow them both.
Okay.
All right.
Seconded.
Okay, wait, I'll give you one, two,
We're
Made the
moving,
motion.
we're moving
Second.
these,
George.
I did.
Okay.
Deferred to the February meeting when we have, or later, whenever we have the definition of exterior streets. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Is that for both?
Yes,
RZ 12,
for both.
18, and 19?
Yes, because they both mention exterior streets.
Do we, I know we've exchanged a bunch of emails. Can we clarify what we're going to do in January as far as work sessions and the like? Robin had recommended a January 22nd work session. We had recommended 22nd work session to talk about the zoning matters, because we got to do that before the meeting. The 22nd is the day of the meeting. So
Right.
we had talked about starting at 5:30, because we've got, would you assume these two are gonna be there? The two that we deferred tonight,
No, that would be February.
even though we said we were gonna defer them both to January, and that's,
He's talking about,
The fencing.
no, I'm not talking about the text amendments, I'm talking about the two rezonings.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Those will both be, the two that we deferred
There are
tonight
two
will,
plus, yes.
so the
Plus
the
there's
zoo
the
thing will
Hardeman
not go
store.
away,
Correct,
it's
yes.
coming back, okay.
The Hardeman store's coming back?
Yes, you guys voted to defer it to January, so we have
Right.
3 deferred items to January 22nd.
Okay,
So definitely need an early
Yeah.
meeting.
okay, so the first thing was work session on the 22nd at 5:30. And then the second one was a work session on the 29th to consider the LCI, form-based code, and for Highway 9.
Which I cannot make.
Yes, and, yeah, but I think everyone else weighed in, or at least everyone we heard from, said that they could make it. And that's gonna be at 7, because at 5 o'clock, I've got the consultant in from Orange County, so he's gonna give a.
And we have to listen to him again.
I know. You said you weren't gonna be here, but.
No, that was a joke, I was hoping I could warn him.
we're gonna do a public presentation on transfer development rights and invite all the major landowners, anyone who has more than 5 acres. And have the city attorney there as well, because we've got all the administrative paperwork that needs to be done for anyone to apply for that. So we're gonna have the TDR, you can come, George, you can.
When is that, Kathy?
I only need one more meeting and I can deliver it.
And so we'll have everything that you need to know about TDRs at 5 o'clock.
On the 29th.
29th. So we're gonna go right from that to the.
Without being disrespectful to Rick, because I know he's gonna be here anyway, but I don't wanna speak for everybody else, but I know, I'm assuming that we're gonna be much more interested in not listening to TDRs, but talking about the form-based code.
Yes, and I'll have Caleb start, and he'll go right into, what we're going to propose. And the same with Rick. I mean, it's essentially.
I mean, the only thing we really need Rick to talk to us about is the formulas that are in this one that are different than before, right?
It's the same exact section that's gonna be inserted, to TDR, except the formula has changed. Because the land in Deerfield is more valuable than the land in Crabapple, so there's a little, in terms of the value of the credits, that's what gets changed.
Right.
So we can talk about that. So he won't give you the 101.
Okay.
And neither will Caleb. I think you all pretty well are comfortable with the idea of form-based code. So he might spend 10 minutes talking about it, but he'll go right into the presentation.
Nothing on UN 21.
I haven't heard them. No, they've been quiet. They've been really quiet.
UN 21.
The
United
Agenda
Nations.
21. Agenda 21. The big discussion item
Just come up.
on the Deerfield form-based code is the height.
Right.
That's really what's come out. I mean,
Right.
Crabapple, you're 1 or 2 or 3 stories, that was it, but here, there's a lot of different issues, what has Alpharetta got? What do a lot of these sites already have? That
Makes the transition issue we talked about tonight look small.
Yeah.
It
does.
So, I mean, so there's lots of different issues, so we'll have a good discussion on that, but that seems to be the biggest topic so far that we've
Can you go back to the quick comment about the TDR credit thing? Is the discussion on that based on findings that they've got across the country where we need to adjust the value of the credits to make it more attractive to do a TDR?
Well, we've got Jeff Dorfman, who is a financial consultant from UGA on the TDR team. And so he's the one that's come up with the values for these credits.
So it's not that we're changing the math on it, we're just creating what the assessed value.
We are changing the math.
Yeah, we are changing the
In
math.
terms of the credits, how many credits are you going to need?
Based on the value of the property you're looking to exchange.
Different than the values of
Right.
Crabapple. So
Okay.
Jeff
Oh, I
has done
see.
the real estate analysis.
Okay, I got that.
And he's determined what the credits are to give you the increased density here, what those values are as opposed to Crabapple. So that's really the only change in the TDR ordinance.
Okay.
When you mentioned Dorfman, it reminded me, I had asked before, but this is a product of his work,
That's
which
correct.
we had asked to be able to be a part of when it was being developed, and now it's done. Can we get a presentation on what the financial model looks like and how it works at some point? If it's gonna become part of what
Yeah.
is gonna be in your analysis each time. I mean,
Yes,
I have
it will
no
be.
idea how these cost numbers were derived.
Yeah.
He's got a formula.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar.
Yeah, I'll talk to Chris about that. He did give a presentation at the council one night, obviously, before they accepted it. But I'll talk to Chris about that, okay? See if we can't get him to come back. Tell you, but they are interesting numbers but
Well,
you
we're not,
can't,
I mean, even if, he doesn't have to make a formal pony and dog show. I mean, just understanding the model or seeing the entire model would be helpful. I mean, we all spent enough time with the model we worked with before.
Well, we've got that, and so we can certainly do that.
And there's some sort of just memo with it too.
Yeah, you have to be careful when you're voting on a rezoning that the economic model is not what you based your vote on.
Right.
And the attorneys will tell you that.
Right.
It's a piece of it.
But I, again, Kathy, when I look at this and I see a positive impact in year one of 77,000, I don't really understand without an impact fee ordinance where that 77,000.
That's from the building permits and the LDP permit, so.
Yeah, but that's a crazy assumption to assume that all happens in the first year.
Well, they do ask, well, I think it's spread over 2 years, like, it asks you how many years will you be receiving, permitting fees, and so, I think I said
29
3
lots
years.
and.
I mean,
Yeah.
I will say Ashton Woods, they had 38 lots, and they're almost all sold out, and it's been a little over a year.
Is that
And I'm
right?
not saying
Yeah,
yes.
it's crazy how fast that place is sold.
Wow.
Well, it's
But
because
nothing's being built, it is
Yeah.
lots sold, right?
No,
What's
yeah.
because
I don't know,
we've
there's all
become such an
houses.
attractive
Being
place to
sold, they're
live.
not just spec
Well, look at-
homes.
Wow.
Yeah, the same with Victory Crest,
Victory
across
Crest,
from
yeah.
us. I
Highlands
mean, it's,
and Echelon.
Well, Milton-
every one they
Milton
build,
Crest,
man,
yeah.
it's sold,
Yeah.
bang, bang. I mean,
But
it's
it,
amazing.
Our building official says, well, we're on target for 300 new homes this year in Milton.
Yeah, you said
Wow.
1,000 people
Yep.
on the math on that.
Yep.
At a discount of 30% to market price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of things, we will have plans on the agenda also to have elections for the new year in January, so that'll be on the agenda. And then also I got to you, I'm sorry it was late, but today I gave you a hard copy, Joe's questions. I don't know if it answers his questions, but maybe puts a little more deep to the requirements, or if you have any other questions I can ask.
Yeah, it doesn't go as far as I want it to go, but it's a lot better than what we got now. So what I'd like to do with this, if I can, is send you some comments.
That's fine.
And then, because I also have comments on the,
Attorney's comments.
well, yeah, that too, but the disclosure report form.
Okay, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. No problem. Anything else?
Kathy, I know you probably had a busy day.
Are you serious?
Did you have a
You're gonna
chance
ask
to
about
look at
enforcement again?
whether or
Do
not?
we want
the,
to, do we want to
yeah,
adjourn some
we-
meetings so you
yeah.
can talk
Oh,
about
I have a
enforcement?
question for the record.
Oh,
Is
okay.
that part about the measurement of 5 feet still in the code?
Oh, yes, it is, it is. still-
It is?
Yes.
I thought it was gone from when I looked at the code.
So they are allowed, this is the neon sign issue, if you're allowed to set the neon sign back 5 feet into the store,
Or any sign.
any sign, yes.
But even if it's back 5 feet and it's intended to be viewed from the street, is it not still a window sign?
It's legal.
I would just like to go on the record and say, we do not need our staff helping work around our code.
But it's in the code, Paul.
I know,
It's
but
part of the code.
but to recommend a change like that is just not consistent with where we're going.
Well, you have to, that's on one side, then you have the economic development issue. How are we to help our
Small business.
our businesses, our small businesses stay in the city? And so then
Yeah.
there's really, it's a
Well, they-
two-sided issue. We try to be fair, we try to do
They
what we
can put
can,
things
but,
in their
there's
store
two-
that we want and need. So,
It's like, how do you straddle that fence? I guess it depends if it's an exterior street or
Yeah.
an interior plotted neighborhood.
Right.
What's the next layer, Steve?
No,
Yeah,
not always black and white.
Mr. Edwards.
At the last meeting, at the end, I asked, and I think, Robin, you were gonna check on our ordinance as it relates to homeless.
I saw that note, and urban camping,
yes,
Yeah.
urban
Yes.
camping.
We encourage it.
I was going to apply to urban camping
No,
stuff.
there's enough.
Well,
Just as long as you don't have a
we
neon
do,
sign.
we do if we don't address
Let me
it.
get back with you, I know we have an ordinance on
Okay.
urban camping, but I haven't, that's why I'm gonna look at it,
That's fine.
so, but I did see the note.
Well, the only reason I brought it up, there was another article today on a family in the Milton Herald. Same thing, they were on the street and living in a car and the whole thing.